Hello YouTube. Well, today I'm at the site of the Bear Paw battlefield, and this is where a long struggle by the Nez Perce Indians was finally over. In 1877 they were forced out of their homelands, and in Idaho and Oregon, in that area, and they instead of just having a battle between soldiers and warriors, the chiefs decided to move the entire tribe. So they migrated around between the mountains and the prairies. So the prairies, like this area, was not unusual, or not, for them. But over 4 months, they traveled 1,170 miles with the idea of getting up into Canada and going up where Sitting Bull was. When they got to here, this is 4 months into this journey, they camped in this little area here. This was in October or September 30th, or the 29th they actually got here. And we're going to walk the trail that goes all the way around it. There was 400 women, 100 warriors, and they were exhausted. They only had 40 miles to go to get up into Canada, which is generally in that direction. And but then the army found them, and the army was led by Colonel Miles, and they attacked. Here's a general idea. We're standing right here looking off this way, and the army came in. The 7th Cavalry charged the village. The 2nd Cavalry captured the horses. The 5th Infantry was held in reserve. The Nez Perce were able to drive the soldiers off, and we'll get into more of it as we go on the trail. One real quick correction. It was General Miles. It's on one of the information things, it was labeled wrong. You got to keep in mind, if you ever visit here, that this is a the trail here. It's a loop trail about 1.25 miles long, and people did die here. So they asked us to stay on the trail, respect area. If you find any artifacts, leave them. Possibly tell the National Park Service what you found. But I'm not going to be poking around looking unless I trip over something. One of the reasons this was a good spot for them to camp is there was water. Although this looks pretty dry right now, it's still muddy. So, but with the hills around, we're protected from the wind. Remember, this is end of September and way up in northern Montana, and it gets darn cold, and the wind really rips. So, matter of fact, I'm going to find a spot to camp tomorrow. We're supposed to have some high winds. Fun. So as you go around, they have these markers, like this one right here. This says Chief Joseph's tent, and people have left offerings in remembrance. But keep in mind, after a battle at Big Hole, where a lot of their teepees were burnt, by the time they got here, they didn't have much in the way of shelter, and they basically, people huddled in blankets. The warriors were able to kill a couple of buffalo. Oh, if you come here with somebody in a wheelchair, this is pretty steep. So you may want to keep that in mind. And there's prairie dog holes all over. Anyway, the warriors were able to kill a couple buffalo, so they'd have food. And I cannot pronounce the Nez Perce name for this, but it means manure fire camp. And basically burning buffalo chips because not a lot of wood. On the morning of September 30th, the yellow wolf remembers that it was right after breakfast when the scouts came running back into camp, or riding horde back into camp, yelling, "Stampede the buffaloes, soldiers, soldiers." And Chief Joseph was able, his voice carried over everybody, or all the noise, and said, "Horses, horses, save the horses." Very important. By the night of the 30th, the Nez Perce had been able to fight the soldiers off, but they were surrounded. And the soldiers were all completely around the camp, two together, always keep watch. And the tribe had started using scrapers and pans and whatnot to dig ditches to be able to hide from the soldiers' sniper fire. And sorry, I'm walking uphill. And they were not able, they couldn't cook. They couldn't get down to the creek for water except for at night. And they had to, they had the dried bison and whatnot to eat. But they fed the children first. And so some of them, like Yellow Wolf, said he didn't have anything to eat for 3 days. So it was in this coulee is where they tried to dig in caves. It started to rain. The rain turned to snow. And the ground froze, just making things that much harder. Now if it just been the warriors, they probably would have been able to fight their way out and escape. But part of the thing with them was to protect the women and children. And so they stayed. So up along this bluff, the warriors dug shallow rifle pits, because this had turned into a siege. And the siege was go on for 6 days. But on the they lost 26 people on that first day. And the looking glass on that spot, like this pit, I'm not sure if that's the original pit or they dug it, but somebody had saw what they saw a Indian on horseback in the distance, and said, the warriors said, looking glass, look, a Sioux. And so he stepped out of the pit unprotected and was hit in the forehead by one of the army snipers and died. So he died on this spot. Conjecture is he stepped out of the pit thinking that maybe Sitting Bull and his people had come down to help rescue them. And sadly, not true. On the second day, so October 1st, under a flag of truce, Miles and Chief Joseph met. We don't know exactly where that happened, somewhere along in here. And they didn't come to any kind of terms. Joseph went to leave. Miles called him back, had him grabbed and put in chains. And the next day, well, shortly after he was captured, a Lieutenant Lowell Jerome was captured. And he was fed, given a blanket to stay warm, treated kindly, even let him have his pistol, as he could walk all around the camp. And they, on the 2nd of October, they did a prisoner exchange, and Joseph was back with his people. Now, was that flag of truce a ruse or an omen? I'll let you judge at the end of this. So along in here, where the 7th Cavalry lined up and racing towards the village. Overconfident. 7th Cavalry. Where does overconfidence ever come from with them? Anyway, they were repulsed. They had a lot of officers either killed or wounded. A lot of their men were wounded. They were basically soundly beaten off. Unfortunately for the Nez Perce, that's the start of the siege. In the 4 months of their travel trying to get away, they were able to slip away from the army or the cavalry a number of times, but this time they were surrounded and they had no chance to escape. So contrast that whole flag of truce with the fact that down in here there were wounded and soldiers, and after nightfall the Nez Perce came out, and let's see, those who fell in the hands of the hostiles were not molested otherwise than stripped of arms and ammunition. And they even gave some of the wounded water after nightfall, and there's even one instance of giving one of the wounded soldiers a blanket. So I don't know about you, but I'm pretty sure I know who was the honorable people at this site, and they sure weren't wearing blue and riding for the U.S. So up here on the high ground, of course, on the other side is where we saw the rifle pits, and along in here the cavalry was ordered to dismount and be firing at the natives on the other side. They brought up a Hotchkiss gun. If you ever never looked that up, if you've never seen one, it's basically a very small cannon, and as far as ball is about like a little bit smaller than my fist. You don't want to get hit with one, but the warriors were able to drive the gunners away from that because they held a strategic ground with perpendicular walls that the soldiers couldn't get into, where they came across and tried to attack that way. They were stopped because that was the only way they could get at them. So siege is on. This is all this September 30th was a lot of this. So this depression in the ground, this was the site of a field hospital where the surgeon would take care of the wounded, and those that died here were buried in a mass grave. That's where this depression is, right here. This is 1877 when all this went on. In 1912, well, the locals would maintain this for years, but 1912 the Army came in and dug up all the remains and moved them to the Custer's monument, where they buried the dead with Custer's men. The tactics that Chief Joseph used on this long 4-month-long event with the cavalry is still taught at West Point, studied, because he was a brilliant tactician and commander. So near this site, on October 5th, 1877, at 11 a.m., the siege had been going on for 6 days. They're at a standoff, and Chief Joseph and Whitebird were the last two remaining chiefs, and they met Miles here, and to win some what they called Treaty Nez Perce, which were, I assume, ones that hadn't gone on the journey with Joseph and the rest. Anyway, when they met here, Chief Joseph, according to a witness, this is what he said, and forgive me if I mispronounce a name here and there. Tell General Howard I know his heart. What he told me before I have in my heart. I'm tired of fighting. Our chiefs are killed. Looking Glass is dead. Tukulxu with an apostrophe U with a thing is dead. The old men are all dead. It is the young men who say yes or no. He who leads the young man is dead. It is cold. We have no blankets. Our children are freezing. My people, some of them have run away to the hills and have no blankets, no food, and no one knows where they are, perhaps freezing to death. I want time to look for my children and see how many I can find. Maybe I shall find them among the dead. Hear me, my chiefs. I am tired. My heart is sick and sad. From where the sun now stands, I will fight no more forever. Famous words. Miles admired Chief Joseph and said that his people would be free to return to their homelands. And again, that promise was broken. This is the end of what they call the Nez Perce Trail. You can follow it all the way from Oregon and Idaho to here. This is the end. And with that, I'm going to leave you and go get some lunch and drink some water. It's hot. This is the middle of July, and we're up in the 90s, and I wouldn't doubt it hits 100 today. So anyway, I'll see you down the road. Safe travels, my friends.
Jumped off the wagon